Hey everyone, this is your OG, and this is another Fateless podcast speed recap. This week, Chosen, Simon, Dirk, and Adam discuss the hottest questions leading into the alpha testing, which is less than 2 weeks away now. You aren't going to want to miss any of this, and we have just sped it up to give you the wave tops. So without further ado, let's optimize.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Fateless podcast episode. We've got a special guest in Adam, who is a returning...
All right, so Simon is on with Adam and Chosen, and Dirk will jump on in the next few minutes as well. Adam works with Fateless as a moderator. He also runs the channel Adventures with Adam. He covers several different games, but of course he'll be covering Godforge going forward. So they do their intros as usual. Adam talks, and they talk about Adam being sort of a detective looking for leaks in the game. And he starts to ask several of the key questions that content creators have been asking about. So he talks about, and we'll just make sure we put the playback speed up to 2 times so that we give you a speed recap version of it. All right, so Adam's first question, he asks Simon and Chosen about accuracy and resistance. Like, okay, how does it work in the game? I mean, we understand needing accuracy for debuffs and disables. That's something we understand from Raid Shadow Legends. So Simon says that yes, you do still need accuracy to land your debuffs and your disables, but you can get 100% chance to land. Dirk goes on to tell us that as he jumps in here in a moment. So they begin their talk, and they're talking about accuracy and resistance. He says, yes, you have a 100% chance to land, and you can build your resistance up so that you have a 100% chance to block debuffs and disables as well. There's not that 3% random chance that exists like it does in Raid, where it can just not work sometimes. Anyways, they added a dimension so that everything that they are using, like accuracy as a stat, has more than just one use, more than one reason to be. So they added basically that accuracy not only allows you to land debuffs if you have more than the resistance, but it also influences your damage potential in that your attack is more accurate and you... there's Dirk. He comes in as well. So when you have higher accuracy, your attack is more pointed, and therefore you have a higher chance to do a strong hit. So strong hits and weak hits, they get into talking about that in a second here as well. Adam makes a good point where he says that, you know, that random RNG does help in keeping it from feeling automatic. Like, you know that you just can't fail because you have this stat, so it'll run. Says that 3% is kind of nice in the sense that it always makes it more interesting to watch. And they have an interesting discussion about how creating frustration helps you to move, helps you to kind of grow in the game by hitting walls. And they basically, Dirk mentions that they took resistance and combined it with resilience, another sort of an idea. So it reduces the damage you take. The higher your resistance, the more it sort of splashes the enemy's attack across, and it doesn't hit for that strong hit, more likely to hit weak. Okay, so getting into strong versus weak, Simon mentions that strong hits multiply with crit damage. So like if you have your crit hit chance at 100% and therefore you get crit damage as well, in Raid it was that your crit damage trumped your strong hit, or vice versa. It was not that you got both, but here you're going to get both. Your strong hits multiply with your crit damage, and like I said, accuracy boosts your strong hit chance. Obviously it starts with affinity based, so if you are a strong affinity against another one, you're more likely to have a strong hit, but accuracy also boosts that strong hit chance as well. You know, something like a 30% chance to strong hit against the right. I think you start with a 30% chance against the right affinity to strong hit. There isn't a 100% strong hit chance available, but you can grow it to 30 or 40% or 50%, something like that maybe. This gets into what Simon was talking about in terms of layered mechanics and giving choice to the gamers. That's been something they're focused on, and how they're building these like stacked builds where you're looking at all these different layers and you can adjust them to min-max a hero's build. So that was pretty interesting. Adam goes on and asks, is there going to be a limit on the number of status effects that can be placed on the enemy? Dirk says right now it's 10. It's just a nice round number. It works, and it's also what people expect. It's what you can do in Raid. So for now, the number of status effects you can place is 10. Although with Bleed, Bleed is a single debuff, and it has a counter to it, so it doesn't take up all 10 spaces. So that's sort of a difference, sort of like Poison in Raid, he mentions. They mention, though, that it's hard to get all the buffs and debuffs to fit in the UI and on the screen. Okay? And so I think there's a few ideas kind of popped into mind as they were talking about it. Usually you see Raid and there's that string of buffs or debuffs if you've got them on your teammates or on the enemy. And at least on your teammates, usually it's the hardest because they overlap onto the heroes to the right of them. So maybe each debuff is a single icon and then everyone has the number of stacks at the bottom right. It looks like they're already going in that direction. But maybe those debuffs and buffs can be made translucent when it isn't the hero's turn. Or maybe they can be stacked diagonally instead of horizontally so they don't overlap on that hero to the right. Or maybe they could just be placed around the head of the hero, kind of like starting on the right side and going up around the head and then to the left side of the head, just so that it doesn't go out to the right extensively. These are just some thoughts, but I'm sure they're working through the UI of how to get the buffs and debuffs to work. And there is the maximum damage. Bandanas are coming out, and they were having a pretty good time. So Simon mentions they thought the icons for the buffs, debuffs are a little too small to read them easily. So, we saw like defense up, right? There's three different defense up, 1, 2, and 3. So if you look at them, the shield is 3 different sort of icons, but you have to look real close to be able to tell the difference between them, and which is stronger and which is weaker is not immediately intuitive. So I would say to make it a little bit more intuitive, maybe the same shield symbol for like defense up, but then it has the 1, the 2, or the 3 in the middle of the shield, something like that, or something where you can see right away that this is the lowest or highest version of the debuff or the buff. Because it's hard to remember like which icon ties to which level of the buff or debuff. So then putting the 1 or the 2 or the 3 kind of makes it more apparent in the icon. Sorry, and I think it helps keep us from gamers from having to go back and check like, oh, which defense up buff is this? Which can be hard to do while you're in the battle. So I think this suggestion applies most to like core stat increases and decreases the best. And I'm not sure if it makes sense, but maybe there's a color gradient that you could do so that it's like very easy to see, like starting with a lighter red and working to a darker red as you get to the highest debuff in the set. I don't know, but just something so you can look and know that this is the highest, this is the, the 20% debuff or the 40 or the 60% debuff. Just in the coloring, I think maybe that could help make it a little more intuitive as well. And that way, while you're in the battle and, stuff's happening, things are moving, you can easily have an idea, oh man, I have the worst debuff on me right now. I can tell because it's like the dark red or whatever versus a lighter red. I don't know, something like that could help sort of delineate the different buffs and debuffs by their strength, because right now they're different versions of the same base. Like there's more detail added to the higher level ones than the lower, but when they're small, it's hard to be able to pick that up, I think. So just some thoughts as I was listening to Simon mention them being a little too small and what we've seen in gameplay. But that way, I really like how they have like standardized the 20, 40, 60% or the 10, 20, 30%. I think that's really helpful. And it's easier to remember. So then all you need to know is like, okay, which stat does this apply to? And is it the 1, 2, or 3? I'll know 20, 40, 60 or 10, 20, 30. So I like how they've created some standardization there. It makes it easier to remember. And then, with them being like small and these debuffs and buff symbols and icons and things moving around the game, it just might not be the easiest thing to notice and pick out all that detail. So some thoughts on how to make it a little more intuitive just by looking at the icon itself. Okay, just a total side quest of thought here, but what if there was a hero animation that went along with like you blocking or resisting a debuff or disable, right? Like the other team tries to put one on you, and because you blocked it, you have high enough res. Maybe there's like a small animation where your character is like no, or something, and it doesn't allow it or something. Just a thought. I don't want to add extra work to the folk there, to Dirk and those guys, but just a thought. Maybe they could have some sort of very short 1-2 second. It couldn't be too long because I know it'd probably slow down the feel of the gameplay, but it could be an area where there'd be something fun to add there. Okay, Dirk mentions how the turn order is shown on the left side when in their game, and that's not always something that's there in a lot of games, and it's hard to tell if it's your turn, even though you're closest to the next turn, you might not be your turn. They talked about damage ranges. They said that's still under discussion. For alpha, it might be a little more fixed, but for launch, it'll definitely have probably a plus or minus 10% damage range so that you get a little bit of variability in your outcomes. That was a great crit hit and strong hit. That doesn't always happen, that's cool to see. So he said, we do hate the struggle, but the reward means nothing without it. And Adam says, yeah, you can't have the highs without the lows. And Simon says he doesn't think too many of the percentages in a lot of these kind of games are that far off, because he's played games where you get all the great characters too fast and it gets really boring. And it doesn't have the depth. Dirk adds too that you also tend to have like no resources to go build up those 10 new legendaries you just got, and it might take you a year before you can actually use them, because that's what it'll take to build them all out for the legendary books or whatever the resources and materials you need are hard to come by. And he says it can kind of kill the excitement you feel from pulling them. And then we get to the bleed debuff. So Adam asks a question about the bleed debuff, and Simon mentions getting Drac first as his first Lego after he beat Fafnir the first time, I guess. So bleeds stay on. They do not fall off like other debuffs. Okay, so he says sort of like poison and raid, but it stacks on itself, so it doesn't take up, it just takes up one spot. It doesn't take up like 5 spots out of the 10 that you have. Mend is the buff that is the counter to remove bleed. So if you have a champion who puts Mend on the team as an invoker, then they are going to remove bleed, and that's the only way you can get rid of it. Otherwise, that one bleed stack will continue to take 1% HP every single time it procs. When you hit, he mentions that they're working out like when you hit max stats of bleed, you get some kind of extra bonus. Dirk said he wants it to be an instant kill, but he's going to see how close, what they can do for that extra bonus. So Adam mentions here that all the status effects have like a little something extra. He says acid takes away shields, barriers. It doesn't just do this damage. He says freeze, it impacts, it slows down the turn meter, and it doesn't change your damage, and Jerk says, yeah, when my hand is cold and I hit it, it doesn't feel like it hurts less or I take less damage. They talk about sleep and how you take extra damage when you're under sleep, and how you don't just get woken back up when you get hit, kind of like raid. So sleep is looking like a very powerful status effect that we'll look to bring with our damage dealing teams. They talk a little bit about transform. It didn't make the cut, but basically you'll turn into one of these different characters, and so he talks about it a little bit later, so I won't go into it too much now. And then they go into confuse, and he said the folks in the friends and family round are having a lot of fun with that, where I guess there was a little bug with it, and it wasn't doing reduced damage when it was the confused teammates were attacking each other. They were doing like full damage, and it was ripping them up. So he mentions that there's 4 heroes in the game with confuse. He mentions Loki, Aphrodite, and Odin. We don't know the 4th one yet, but those are the 3 heroes with confuse. And tomorrow you'll be looking for a video that we'll be doing on Loki more in depth. So take a look for that tomorrow. One of the things I caught here was that a buff or debuff extender is going to be really powerful. We don't know any heroes in the game with that in their kit, but if we do see it, that is going to be extremely useful. Okay, he talks about action attacks versus hits. So Drac has a 4-hitter on his is ultimate. But what they talk about is most of the mechanics proc off of an attack action, just one single attack action, not the number of hits. Or some do go off the number of hits, and you have to look at which it goes off of. And apparently Chosen even created a 7-hitter hero, and he sounded pretty excited about it. So that is pretty cool to see, and good to know that an attack action, one attack is typically how they're going to base it versus the number of individual hits. He then asks Adam about radiance, and they say, oh, it's going to be 10, 20, or 30% as the 3 levels of radiance for this buff. We just didn't know that. Talks about reflect damage, and says, hey, in some instances when you reflect damage, it's takes the damage minus damage mitigation, then it gets reflected and goes back through the enemy's defense, and it winds up being almost nothing for an attack. They said that won't be the case. Their reflect damage feature works well and is going to be something like if you hit hard, you get hit back hard. So that's cool. He then goes on to ask about transform and morph. I guess it's called transform, not morph. So some heroes, specifically ones with shapeshifter lore, Druid, Loki, probably something like that, he said will transform when they're hit with the transform disable, and they will turn into like a bird or a bear or a frog. This is not ready for alpha, but basically the bird, the bear, the frog will all have a basic attack, and it won't be completely useless, and there will be some heroes that will want to transform and will all of a sudden their kit will do amazing things when they transform, so you actually want it to happen. So that's kind of cool. It's going to be a very big shift up or mix up on the polymorph, drama from Raid. I think they found a very interesting way to still keep a mechanic similar, but not have it create so much ire and brokenness in the game. So that's really awesome. They talk about disabling, how to not have some, bosses so that, oh, okay, all of your kit doesn't work on this boss, so they're trying to think through that and make it so that, okay, if it doesn't work on the boss, it does this, something else. So they're always looking at how, there's choice, and if you're in a situation where, okay, it's not really the right space for you to maximize this kit, it can still be useful. The champion doesn't become completely useless and you just want to put them in a vault and throw them away. They're really trying to do away with the idea that any hero in the game is going to be completely useless, and I think that's a great thing to see. We talked about multi-hit skills, we talked about radiance and morph. So all right, folks, that is going to wrap us up for another week of the Fateless Podcast Speed Recap. Thanks for sticking with me. This was a really juicy one. We got to hear all kinds of details, specifically explaining how things work in the game that we were waiting to confirm. All great stuff. And Adam obviously does a great job asking good questions and getting great answers for the community. So thank you, Adam, for doing that as well. Thanks for sticking with me all the way through here to the end of this. Be sure to take care of yourself, and remember, play smarter.